Night of the Spadefoot Toads, Chapter 1. That new teacher, Mrs. Tibbitz, is 100 years old. You'll see, Frankie announces. 200 years old, another voice says. Ben Maroney ignores him as he heads down the hall. Jenny Ferreira is walking beside him. The other kids in his 5th grade class are stretched out in a loose lineup and down the hall, headed to science class. Mrs. Tibbitz isn't that old, Jenny tells Ben, and she's not a new teacher. She's just been out for a while. My brother had her in 5th grade a couple of years ago. Ben nods. He likes Jenny. She's one of the few kids who talk to him, maybe just because he sits behind her in class. He's been at Edinburgh Elementary School for 2 months, but he still feels new. Now they've got a new science teacher, too. She's new to Ben, at least. Everybody else in the class seems to know her. She's 1,000,000 years old, Frankie shouts so everyone in the hall can hear. He bends over and hobbles down the hall like an old woman, and Tommy Miller and Dennis DeMeo laugh. Frankie thinks he's a lot funnier than he is, but there are always kids who will laugh at him, even when he's being mean. It's strange to get a new science teacher at the end of March. Ben wonders where Mrs. Tibbitz has been, and more importantly, why she came back. When Ben walks into the classroom, he doesn't see the science teacher, but he does see the mice. They're in a new cage on the table against a black wall next to the stacks of textbooks and papers. He figures there are 6 mice in it. Ben knows something about mice, but not as pets. He knows about mice for foods for diamondback rattlesnakes. He's seen rattlesnakes eat mice lots of times. There are no diamondback rattlesnakes in Edinburgh, Massachusetts. Ben's pretty sure of that. The rattlesnakes he used to watch were at the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona, where he lived until February. Along with whip snakes and sidewinders and horned toads and chuckwalla lizards, all he's seen since they moved to Massachusetts are some squirrels and chipmunks in his backyard and some birds at the window feeder. Ben walks toward the cage to get a closer look at the mice. Ryan Brisson starts pounding on a desk not far from the table. "Ben! Ben!" he yelled. "Sit here!" With a new teacher, there aren't any rules yet, and everyone is thinking they can sit anywhere they want. Frankie, Tommy, and Dennis have claimed desks all together on the other side of the room. Ryan's a skinny little kid who wears glasses. One of the lenses is covered over with a patch, and the other lens magnifies his good eye. He's always peering at people out of that one big eye. He's the most hyper kid that Ben has ever met. It's like his mother gives him a pound of sugar right before he leaves for school every day. He drives Ben crazy. He drives the other kids crazy. He even drives the teachers crazy. Ben wishes he had a real friend, not like Jenny, who only talks to him because she sits in front of him, or Ryan, who's officially wacko. He'd like to find someone like Toby, his best friend back in Tucson. "Sit here," Ryan says again, pounding on the desk like a bass drum. "It's the only empty seat." The kid is a human noise machine. He'd be noisy even if he were sitting still, which he never is. Ben glances around the classroom. The new teacher, Mrs. Tibbitz, hasn't arrived yet. Teachers are usually pretty good about not leaving a classroom unattended, but sometimes it happens. He looks at the mice again, then thinks about Mr. Tompkins, the director of the children's program at the Desert Museum. Ben loved that museum. He'd taken every summer class they offered for his age group, and he'd talked his parents into taking him there almost every Saturday during the school year. Mr. Tompkins had promised Ben that when he was a little older, he could help out with one of the summer programs. But then, in December, Ben's dad was offered a new job, and 2 months later, his family packed up and left Tucson. Now, he's stuck here looking at mice in Massachusetts. He doesn't even have his souvenirs from the museum. That box that held his favorite things from his bedroom got lost in the move, and the moving company can't find it. Ryan is still pounding on the desk, calling for Ben, but it's like the kid has forgotten what he really wants and now just enjoys the sound of his own pounding and chanting. "Here, here, here," he's saying. "Ryan Brisson!" Frankie Murley shouts out in a creaky voice. "Ryan Brisson, could you kindly shut your trap for once in your life?" He's still imitating an old woman. Dennis and Tommy and a couple of other boys who always laugh at Frankie's jokes let out loud gwaffs. Mrs. Tibbitz still hasn't arrived yet, and the kids are all standing up and talking and making noise. The longer there's not a teacher in the room, the wilder it gets. Even the mice in the cage are now agitated, running around like the students in the room. Ben knows how to handle mice. He undoes the latch, reaches in and scoops one in his hand, then latches the door shut. He lets the mouse run from one hand to another, putting each hand in front of the one that's holding it. Hey, wow, what are you doing? Ryan jumps out of his seat and skips over to where Ben is holding the mouse. Are you supposed to do that? No way, another kid says. Old Mrs. Tibbitz will kill you. They're probably for a science experiment or something. Other kids gather around. Ben is holding the mouse close to his face, looking at its twitching nose and bright eyes. He thinks about how the workers at the museum fed the mice to snakes. At first, he was upset, but Mr. Tompkins had explained that it was all part of the cycle of life. It's sad, he'd said, but all species depend on other forms of life to live. That's why there are so many mice, to make sure that the species survives. Of course, we're at the top of the food chain. There's a lot for us, but that's because there's no one to eat us. You should put it back, Jenny says to Ben, before Mrs. Tibbitz gets yours. She's twisting her fingers in her hair like she's the one who's going to get in trouble. It's okay, Ben says. I just want to see it for a minute. Ryan reaches for the mouse, trying to get it out of Ben's hands. Let me hold him, he says. I'll be careful. No, Ryan, Ben says, twisting around to shield the mouse. Ryan manages to grab Ben's wrist with one hand. Wait, Ben yells, but Ryan clamps down on the little animal with his other hand. Afraid the mouse will be crushed, Ben lets go. Ryan lifts it up in the air like a trophy or something. I've got it, he shrieks. It's squirmy. Well, duh, Frankie sneers. Well, duh, the three other boys echo. Ryan tries to hold onto the mouse, but it crawls out of his hands and runs down his arms. Ah, he yells, and the whole class starts screaming. The mouse leaps off of Ryan's arms, lands on the floor, and skitters under the desk, looking for a safe place to hide. But there's no safe place, not with a bunch of fifth graders after it. Get it, Frankie shouts in his old woman's voice. Killer mouse on the loose! 3 or 4 kids squeal and run to the opposite side of the room, like it really is a killer mouse, and it might hurt them. It climbed down my arm. Get it! Ryan is dancing around in circles of kids who are on their hands and knees looking for the mouse. 3 or 4 of them corner it in the front of the room. I'll get it, Ben says, pushing his way through the crowd. He's about to scoop it up when another voice yells out and everybody freezes where they are. What is going on in here? Ben turns to see a woman standing in the door of the classroom. There's a moment when nobody says anything, and then everybody runs to their seats, trying not to laugh, even though they know that they're in trouble. It's funny and scary at the same time. Now is Ben's chance to catch the mouse, so he kneels down and scoops it up, and then turns his face to the teacher. Mrs. Tibbitz is an older woman, but nowhere near 100 years old. She stands straight tall and not bent over at all. Ben is never good at guessing how old grown-ups are, but he figures she's as old as his grandmother Maroney. Her long graying hair is pulled back behind her ears in a braid that reaches partway down her back. She's wearing a bulky wool sweater and a long skirt. But the most interesting thing about her is her feet. She's wearing a pair of old leather hiking boots. Ben has never seen a teacher in hiking boots. Before anybody can say anything else, Frankie stands and points at Ben. He let the mouse out. Frankie sounds happy. A lot of people like to see other people get in trouble, but Frankie loves it. He let the mouse out. I told him not to. Mrs. Tibbitz looks at Ben with her eyes squinted a little. Ben holds up the mouse in his hands. He can feel its own heart beating. It's okay. I caught it, he says. Put it back in the cage, please, she says. Everyone in their seats. The entire classroom watches as Ben walks across the room. He opens the cage door and slips the mouse back in. The rescued animal scurries around the cage, jumps over a couple of other mice until it reaches a corner and huddles like there's nothing unusual has happened. Mrs. Tibbitz tells Ben to find a seat and walks over to the small teacher's desk in front of her class. Here, Ben, shouts Ryan, pounding on the desk next to his. Sit here! There's nowhere else to sit, so Ben slides into the vacant desk. Ryan gives him a lopsided smile. Ben looks away. He feels like he's balancing on a tightrope, trying to be nice to Ryan, but not too nice. Ben doesn't want to be mean, but the kid is too hyper to be a good friend. And Ben knows that being nice to Frankie's favorite victim will make him a target, too. It's enough to make his head hurt. Mrs. Tibbitz writes her name on the board and stands at the front of the class for a moment waiting. It gets very quiet. Even Ryan seems to be holding still, which is a minor miracle. My name is Mrs. Tibbitz, and I'll be teaching you science for the rest of the year. Most of you probably know I've been a teacher here at Edinburgh for many years. I took a little time off, and now I'm back. The teacher walks back to the front of her desk, taking her time. Ben sneaks another glance at her hiking boots. I expect you to sit in your seats the moment you come to class, whether I'm here or not. She pauses and looks around. And please do not touch anything in the room unless you ask my permission. Especially animals in cages. Animals are living things that need to be treated carefully. They're not toys. Frankie turns and looks at Ben and wags his finger. Mrs. Tibbitz walks over and puts a hand on his shoulder. Ugh, Frankie squawks like he's being strangled. Dennis laughs. Mrs. Tibbitz glares at Frankie, then returns to the board at the front of the class. She writes down a bunch of words and asks the kids to copy them down into their notebooks so that they can look them up for homework. Ben wonders why she just doesn't hand out a sheet with the words on them. While the kids are writing down the words, Mrs. Tibbitz patrols the aisles. When Mrs. Tibbitz passes by Ben's desk, he notices that her hiking boots are a little muddy. He wonders if she walked to school or something, and then he looks back over at the mice again. Mrs. Tibbitz walks down the row of desks, then turns up the next aisle. When she gets to Ben's desk again, she leans over his paper. I finished, Ben says. She reaches out with her wrinkled hand and jabs a short, cracked fingernail at the word on his paper. Mrs. Kutcher has a fingernail polish on her fingernails, Ben thinks, not Mrs. Tibbitz. Ben looks at the word under her finger, and he sees that he has accidentally left out the T out of nocturnal. He already knows what the word means, something that comes out at night. He fixes the spelling. The teacher leans over the desk a little farther and asks in a soft voice, What is your name? Ben, he says. Ben Maroney. Mrs. Tibbit's sweater doesn't smell like school. It smells like the outdoors, like wood smoke and fresh air. Good, she says, looking right at him. The lines around her eyes and mouth turn down a little, making her look sad. Ben, please don't touch those mice again. Do you understand me? Ben feels his face get hot. He nods, but he wants to defend himself too. I've taken care of mice before, he muttered. I know about them. They're not pets, she says. I know how to hold them, Ben says, but Mrs. Tibbitz has already straightened up and is starting to walk away. If they're not pets, what are they for? Ben asks a little louder, and a couple of kids turn around and look back at him. Mrs. Tibbitz looks back at him too, her eyebrows raised. Ben can feel that he's pushing it a little, but he wants to know. Are they for bait or food, or maybe for an experiment? I know someone who feeds mice to snakes. Is it something like that, he asks. Now everybody is watching Mrs. Tibbitz to see how she is going to react. Ben waits for her to get mad, but she doesn't. Her lips scrunch up, almost like she's trying not to smile. Go over the words one more time, Ben, she says. I brought the mice in to show second graders, and we're not talking about snakes today. Maybe some other day. Mrs. Tibbitz goes back to the front of the room and begins to talk about the differences between warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. Ben is only half listening. He already knows all that. But he hears a word that makes his heart skip a beat in his chest. Snakes. He looks back at the mice again and then up at Mrs. Tibbitz with her gray hair and cracked fingernails and baggy sweater and hiking boots.